Hey guys, tonight we enter Maurya Justice, the imposing world of the Maurya Empire, where law was strict, punishments were bizarre, and the ruler's word was absolute. You step into a realm where every crime, from theft to blasphemy, could be met with penalties so harsh they might make you wince and maybe question just how we ended up here. You probably won't survive this, especially if you're planning to break any laws. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time below. I love knowing who's braving this dark journey with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into the world of Mauryan punishments. Imagine a time about 2,300 years ago, when the Maurya Empire stretched across most of the Indian subcontinent, ruled by powerful kings like Chandragupta and Ashoka. Their legal system was complex, blending strict codes with ruthless enforcement. Justice was not just a matter of law, but a tool of control, maintaining order across a vast and diverse empire. The punishments were varied and often gruesome: corporal punishment, public humiliation, mutilation, and even torture designed to terrorize and deter. Some penalties were physical, some psychological, and others outright bizarre, crafted to fit the crime and impress upon both the punished and the public the power of the state. A quirky tidbit: it's said that some punishments included forcing offenders to wear humiliating costumes or devices, turning them into spectacles of shame. Medieval cringe. Historians still argue whether these harsh penalties were common or reserved for only the most serious offenses. As you settle in, prepare to journey through this shadowy landscape of ancient justice where cruelty and control walked hand in hand. Who stepped further into the Maurya Empire's legal system, a sophisticated blend of law and order designed to maintain control over a sprawling, diverse population. The empire's laws were not haphazard. They reflected a structured, hierarchical approach to justice that combined royal decrees, local customs, and philosophical ideals. The Mauryan legal system was influenced by various schools of thought, including the Arthashastra, an ancient treatise attributed to Chanakya, Chandragupta's advisor. This text provided detailed guidelines on governance, law, and punishment, emphasizing both deterrence and state power. Imagine the emperor as the supreme source of justice, his officials and local judges acting as enforcers of his will. Crimes were categorized, some punishable by fines, others by corporal punishment or even death. The goal was clear: maintain order and prevent rebellion. A quirky tidbit: the Arthashastra even suggested using spies to gather evidence, a medieval intelligence network designed to keep the empire secure and law-abiding. Historians still debate how much the Arthashastra was actually implemented versus being an idealized blueprint. You sense that justice in the Maurya Empire was as much about political control as about fairness, a tightrope walk between maintaining power and administering law. As you dive deeper, prepare to witness how this legal framework translated into real, often terrifying, punishments. You feel the immense weight resting on the emperor's shoulders, the king as the supreme judge of the Maurya Empire. His decrees were law, his decisions final. Imagine sitting before the royal court, your fate tied to the whims of a ruler whose power was both absolute and visible in every aspect of life. The king wasn't just a distant figure. He was the ultimate symbol of justice and order. His word carried divine authority, and his punishments reflected not only legal norms but the need to demonstrate strength and deter dissent. Picture a procession where offenders were brought before the monarch, their crimes announced aloud, and sentences delivered with no room for negotiation. The king's involvement varied from personally judging major crimes to delegating routine cases to ministers and local officials. A quirky tidbit: some emperors were known to personally inspect public executions, turning them into political theater meant to reinforce their authority. Historians still argue the extent to which the king was involved in day-to-day justice versus relying on a bureaucracy. You realize that the Mauryan legal system was as much about spectacle and power as about punishing wrongdoing. As you watch, you grasp the fear and awe that the emperor inspired, a ruler whose gaze alone could decide life or death. You step into the gritty reality of corporal punishment in the Maurya Empire, where lashes and flagellation were not just disciplinary tools but instruments of public control and deterrence. Imagine the sharp crack of a whip echoing through a crowded square, the skin of the condemned reddening and breaking under repeated strikes. Pain was a message etched vividly onto flesh to warn others. These punishments varied in severity depending on the crime. Thieves might receive dozens of lashes, while those accused of rebellion faced brutal beatings intended to break both body and spirit. Public flagellation served to shame offenders, making them visible examples of what happens when you step out of line. You can almost hear the crowd's murmurs, a mix of pity and fear, as the punished endure their sentences under watchful eyes. It wasn't just about retribution, it was about maintaining order through spectacle. A quirky tidbit: some historical accounts suggest that offenders were sometimes whipped with reeds or branches soaked in bitter herbs, adding a sting that lasted long after the lashes ended. Historians still debate the frequency and regulation of these punishments. Were they routine or reserved for particularly serious offenses? You sense that corporal punishment was both a physical and psychological tool, intertwining pain with public humiliation. In the Maurya Empire, the crack of the lash was a harsh reminder: obey or suffer the consequences. You find yourself before the grim spectacle of the cage punishment, a form of confinement designed as much for public humiliation as for incarceration. Picture a sturdy wooden cage, just large enough to hold a person, suspended in a busy marketplace or at the city gates. Here offenders were displayed for days, exposed to the sun's relentless glare, rain, and the curious eyes of passers-by. Being trapped in this cage meant a slow degradation of body and spirit. Hunger, thirst, and exposure took their toll, turning the punishment into a psychological ordeal as much as a physical one. The offender became a living warning, a spectacle of shame that reinforced the community's moral order. You can almost hear the whispers of onlookers, some scornful, others perhaps empathetic, but all reminded of the price of breaking the law. The cage was not merely a punishment, it was a tool to publicly strip away dignity and social standing. A quirky tidbit: in some cases, cages were designed with iron spikes on the bottom, preventing the occupant from sitting comfortably, a medieval way of turning suffering into art. Historians still debate whether this punishment was widespread or confined to high-profile criminals. You realize the cage was a form of control that extended beyond the body, targeting reputation, mental endurance, and social bonds. In the Maurya Empire, justice could be as much about spectacle as severity. You step into the grim world of amputation and mutilation, punishments designed to cripple both body and spirit. Imagine the terror of losing a hand, a foot, or part of the ear, not just a penalty but a permanent mark, a walking warning to the community. In the Maurya Empire, such punishments were often meted out for serious crimes like theft or betrayal. The logic was harsh: remove the offender's ability to commit the crime again and publicly brand them as a criminal for life. Picture the public spectacle: offenders displayed with missing limbs, their deformities a constant reminder of the price of transgression. These punishments were as much about deterrence as justice, instilling fear through visible consequences. A quirky tidbit: some texts mention offenders being branded with hot irons before mutilation, adding another layer of pain and shame. Historians still debate how common such extreme penalties were and how they were perceived socially. Were they seen as justice or cruelty? You feel the chilling weight of these punishments, where the body became a canvas of the law's wrath. In the Maurya Empire, the scars of punishment ran deep, both seen and unseen. You witness forced labor and public humiliation, punishments designed not just to punish but to break down the offender's social standing and enforce communal values. Imagine being shackled and sent to work under the scorching sun, performing back-breaking tasks while the community watches your fall from grace. These punishments were common for a range of offenses, from petty theft to more serious crimes. Forced labor might include building roads, digging canals, or working in mines, arduous tasks that served the empire but also served as a reminder of one's fall from favor. Public humiliation added another layer, forcing offenders to wear signs, carry heavy loads, or parade through town in shameful attire. The goal was clear: strip away dignity and mark the offender as an example. A quirky tidbit: in some cases, offenders were made to wear masks or costumes depicting animals or mythical creatures, heightening the spectacle and the shame. Historians still debate the balance between punishment and rehabilitation. Were these measures meant to reintegrate offenders or permanently ostracize them? You feel the weight of these punishments, where toil and shame worked hand in hand to enforce order. In the Maurya Empire, justice was as much about social control as about retribution. You find yourself in the chilling realm of poisoning and slow death penalties, methods designed to prolong suffering as a form of both punishment and deterrence. Picture a shadowy chamber where a condemned person ingests a deadly concoction, each moment stretching into agony as the poison courses through their veins. In the Maurya Empire, certain crimes warranted such grisly fates, reserved for enemies of the state or those guilty of treason. The slow, deliberate nature of these punishments was meant to send a stark message. Betrayal would be met with prolonged retribution, not swift mercy. Imagine the psychological torment of knowing death is certain but agonizingly delayed, a fate worse than immediate execution. Public knowledge of such punishments amplified fear and reinforced loyalty to the empire. A quirky tidbit: some historical texts describe the use of snake venom or plant-based toxins as instruments of execution, tapping into the empire's vast knowledge of natural poisons. Historians still argue how common these slow death penalties were, with some suggesting they were more symbolic than routine. You feel the grim shadow these punishments cast, a reminder of the empire's uncompromising approach to justice. In the Maurya Empire, death was not always swift, and suffering could be weaponized as a tool of statecraft. You find yourself stepping into the eerie world where animals were enlisted as agents of punishment. Imagine the terror of being chained in an arena or remote wilderness, exposed to the prowling dangers of wild beasts, a spectacle both horrifying and humiliating. The Maurya Empire reportedly used animals like lions, elephants, or venomous snakes to execute or torment criminals, turning nature into a living executioner. This method combined cruelty with public spectacle, reinforcing the consequences of defying imperial law. Picture crowds gathering to witness these grim displays, the tension thick as the predators circled their helpless prey. It was justice served raw and primal, a vivid reminder that lawbreakers faced forces beyond human control. A quirky tidbit: some accounts mention specially trained elephants used not only in battle but to trample offenders as a brutal form of capital punishment. Historians still debate how widespread these punishments were they a common practice or reserved for the most heinous criminals. You sense the primal fear these punishments evoked, blending human justice with the raw power of the natural world. In the Maurya Empire, sometimes the wild was enlisted to enforce the law. You step into the unsettling realm of water, torture, and sensory punishments, designed to break not just the body but the mind. Imagine the slow, chilling drip of water on your forehead, relentless and maddening, or the suffocating silence of sensory deprivation or calculated assault on your senses. In the Maurya Empire, such punishments were employed to extract confessions or punish dissenters, wielding psychological torment as effectively as physical pain. The constant drip, the enforced isolation, or overwhelming sensory stimuli could shatter even the strongest will. You can almost feel the slow crawl of time, the mind unraveling under ceaseless pressure. These punishments blurred the lines between justice and cruelty, aiming to control through mental breakdown. A quirky tidbit: ancient texts describe sensory punishments, involving blaring horns or bright lights intended to disorient and punish offenders of medieval sensory overload. Historians still debate the prevalence and methods of such punishments, questioning their effectiveness versus their brutality. You grasp that in the Maurya Empire, punishment extended beyond flesh to the fragile realm of the mind. These methods remind you that justice was a multi-sensory experience, often terrifying in unexpected ways. You find yourself amidst the grim spectacle of public executions, where death was not just a legal penalty but a communal event. Imagine crowds gathering in open spaces, the air thick with tension and anticipation as the condemned is led to the gallows or stake. In the Maurya Empire, executions served as powerful reminders of the state's authority. They were carefully orchestrated to maximize public impact, reinforcing the consequences of crime and rebellion. Sometimes, executions were accompanied by rituals or proclamations, cementing the law's power. You sense the atmosphere equal parts fear, curiosity, and sometimes morbid fascination as onlookers witness the final moments of the punished. These events were spectacles of control, designed to deter potential lawbreakers. A quirky tidbit: some sources mention that executioners wore masks or costumes, adding a theatrical element to the grim proceedings. Historians still debate how frequent and public these executions were, as well as their social impact. You realize that in the Maurya Empire, death was not private but a collective lesson. The public nature of punishment turned individuals into symbols of the law's reach and might. You delve into the harsh world of theft punishments, where even minor property crimes could lead to severe consequences. Imagine the tension in the marketplace as thieves faced fines, corporal punishment, or worse, a reflection of the Maurya Empire's zero-tolerance approach to stealing. Stealing disrupted not just property rights but social order, and the empire's laws aimed to protect the community by making examples of offenders. Punishments could include lashings, amputation, or forced labor, depending on the value of the stolen goods and the circumstances. Picture a thief standing before a crowd, branded by shame and pain, a warning to all who might consider similar crimes. A quirky tidbit: some punishments involved public restitution ceremonies, where thieves had to return stolen items and make formal apologies, blending justice with ritual. Historians still debate how these theft laws balance deterrence and rehabilitation. You sense that theft was a crime that threatened not just wealth but the fragile trust holding communities together. In the Maurya Empire, stealing wasn't just unlawfully, it was a threat to society's very fabric. You step into the sensitive and tightly controlled world of punishments for adultery and sexual crimes in the Maurya Empire. Imagine a society where sexual morality was enforced not just privately but publicly, with severe penalties designed to uphold family honor and social order. Adultery, especially by women, was met with harsh punishments ranging from public shaming to physical penalties. The empire's laws reflected a strict patriarchal order, where the control of sexual behavior was linked to maintaining lineage and property rights. Picture a woman forced to endure public humiliation or corporal punishment as her community watches, the social stigma lasting a lifetime. Men, too, faced consequences, though often less severe, reflecting gender dynamics in justice. A quirky tidbit. Some sources describe the use of ordeal by water, where the accused underwent tests believed to prove innocence or guilt, intertwining justice with superstition. Historians still debate how strictly these sexual laws were enforced and their impact on gender relations in the empire. You sense the complex intersection of law, morality, and power shaping punishments related to intimacy. In the Maurya Empire, sexual crimes weren't just personal matters, they were societal concerns demanding harsh regulation. You step into the sacred and often perilous realm of religious crimes and blasphemy in the Maurya Empire. Imagine a society where the divine and the legal intertwined, and offenses against religious norms were met with harsh punishments designed to protect spiritual order. Blasphemy, sacrilege, or defiance of sacred rituals were not taken lightly. Punishments could range from fines and public penance to corporal punishment or exile, depending on the severity and intent. Picture the accused standing before priests and officials, their fate sealed by both legal and spiritual authorities, a dual judgment reflecting the inseparability of religion and law. A quirky tidbit. Some punishments involved rituals of purification or forced participation in ceremonies meant to cleanse the offender of spiritual pollution. Historians still argue how much religious law influenced secular punishments and to what extent these were uniform across the empire. You feel the tension between faith and fear, where crossing spiritual boundaries invited not just human wrath but cosmic consequences. In the Maurya Empire, offending the divine was a crime punishable by both man and god. You now consider the fate of child offenders in the Maurya Empire, where age did not always grant mercy. Imagine the delicate balance between recognizing youth and enforcing justice, a challenge that medieval societies faced with limited resources and rigid laws. Children caught committing crimes faced punishments, though often less severe than adults. Juvenile justice aimed to correct behavior without fully imposing adult penalties, but the line was thin and often crossed. In some cases, children might be apprenticed, whipped, or even sent to labor camps. Picture the haunting scene of a young offender, torn between fear and confusion, standing before judges who saw both vulnerability and potential threat. A quirky tidbit. Some ancient texts suggest that mentorship and rehabilitation programs were rudimentary but existed to guide young offenders back onto the right path. Historians still debate how juvenile justice functioned in practice and its effectiveness in shaping behavior. You sense that the Maurya Empire wrestled with the complexities of youth and law, balancing discipline with compassion in a harsh world. Even children were not beyond the reach of justice. You now step into the gendered world of Mauryan punishments, where women faced a distinct legal landscape. Imagine how justice unfolded differently depending on gender, reflection of the deeply patriarchal society of the empire. Women accused of crimes often faced harsher social consequences, with punishments focusing heavily on preserving family honor and societal order. Public humiliation, physical punishment, and social ostracism were common, especially for offenses related to morality and obedience. Picture a woman forced to wear shameful garments or paraded through town, her dignity stripped away in a male-dominated legal system that saw her as both property and symbol. A quirky tidbit. Some texts mention women being subjected to specific humiliations, like being tied to a donkey or made to wear cages, a medieval form of public shaming with gendered twists. Historians still debate how much legal protections women had versus how punitive the system truly was. You feel the harsh realities faced by women under Mauryan law, where justice was often a tool of control as much as fairness. In the Maurya Empire, gender shaped the experience of punishment in profound and often brutal ways. You find yourself navigating a surprising facet of Mauryan justice's moments of mercy, rehabilitation, and pardons that punctuated the otherwise harsh legal landscape. Despite the brutal punishments, there were occasions when the empire showed clemency. Imagine an offender granted a royal pardon, their punishment commuted in exchange for loyalty, service, or restitution. Such acts served political and social functions, reinforcing the king's image as a just but merciful ruler. Rehabilitation efforts, though rudimentary by modern standards, included forced labor under supervision or re-education through religious instruction. The aim was sometimes to reintegrate offenders rather than simply punish. A quirky tidbit. Some sources describe festivals or special days when prisoners could petition for forgiveness or reduced sentences, early forms of clemency rituals. Historians still debate how widespread or genuine these mercy practices were, or if they were mostly symbolic gestures. You realize that even in a system known for severity, there was space for humanity and political calculation. In the Maurya Empire, justice balanced cruelty with moments of compassion, if only to maintain order. You move deeper into the complex network of officials and local judges who administered justice across the vast Maurya Empire. Imagine the intricate bureaucracy tasked with enforcing the emperor's laws in diverse regions, each with unique customs and challenges. These officials acted as extensions of royal authority, overseeing trials, collecting fines, and ensuring punishments were carried out. Their power was significant, but so were the risks of corruption and abuse, constant tension in maintaining fairness. Picture a local judge balancing imperial directives with local traditions, navigating the delicate dance of justice and diplomacy. Officials were often chosen for loyalty and administrative skill rather than legal expertise. A quirky tidbit. Some records hint at officials carrying special seals or badges, symbols of their authority that could also be used to intimidate or impress. Historians still debate how consistent legal application was across the empire and how much local autonomy influenced verdicts. You sense the human element behind the law, officials interpreting, enforcing, and sometimes bending justice in a vast and diverse realm. In the Maurya Empire, the king's justice flowed through many hands, each shaping the law's impact. You now delve into the political treatise that shaped much of Mauryan law and punishment, the Arthashastra. Imagine a secret manual dense with advice on governance, espionage, economics, and justice, penned by Chanakya, Chandragupta's astute advisor. The Arthashastra didn't just dictate laws. It prescribed punishments as tools for maintaining state power and social order. Its recommendations ranged from brutal penalties for traitors to cunning psychological punishments designed to deter crime and rebellion. Picture the strategist's mind behind these prescriptions, punishments crafted not only to punish but to instill fear and loyalty, ensuring the emperor's reign remained unchallenged. A quirky tidbit. The text includes advice on using false accusations or manipulating justice as political weapons, a reminder that law was often entwined with power plays. Historians still debate how literally the Arthashastra was applied and whether it reflected actual practices or idealized strategies. You feel the cold calculation behind Mauryan justice, a blend of law, politics, and survival in a ruthless world. In the empire, punishment was a means to an end, control. You peer into the stone and palm leaf records left behind, uncovering inscriptions and texts that reveal Mauryan punishments in stark detail. Imagine ancient carvings etched into temple walls or copper plates, documenting laws, decrees, and sometimes grisly penalties meted out to offenders. These archaeological treasures offer glimpses into a justice system where punishment was both legal necessity and political statement. They confirm accounts of harsh penalties, amputations, public shaming, and executions, bringing history's whispers to vivid life. You can almost feel the weight of those inscriptions. Voices of a distant past declaring who was guilty and how they were made to pay. A quirky tidbit: some inscriptions include poetic condemnations of criminals, blending law with literary flair, medieval version of roasting someone in public. Historians still debate how representative these records are of everyday justice versus extraordinary cases. You realize that these ancient texts bridge centuries, giving us rare windows into the Maurya Empire's harsh but fascinating legal world. You're now exposed to the most bizarre and shocking punishments unique to the Maurya Empire, penalties that stretch the imagination and unsettle the senses. Imagine criminals subjected to punishments like being sewn into animal skins and abandoned, or forced to walk through streets wearing grotesque masks that marked them as outcasts. These extraordinary penalties were crafted to maximize humiliation, fear, and deterrence, transforming offenders into living warnings. Some punishments combined physical pain with psychological torment, blurring the line between justice and cruelty. A quirky tidbit: there are accounts of offenders being paraded with their heads shaved and painted in vivid colors, a walking spectacle of shame designed to linger in public memory. Historians still debate whether these punishments were common or largely exaggerated by later sources. You feel the empire's desire to control through spectacle, crafting punishments that haunted both offender and observer. In the Maurya Empire, bizarre justice was a tool of absolute power. You widen your view to compare Mauryan punishments with those of other ancient empires, the Greeks, Romans, and Persians. Imagine a vast tapestry of ancient justice, each thread revealing similarities and stark differences in how societies enforced law and order. While the Mauryas favored brutal corporal punishments and public humiliation, other empires developed unique approaches: Roman crucifixion, Greek ostracism, Persian impalement, all designed to deter and control. Yet the underlying aim remained consistent: uphold power and societal norms through fear and spectacle. A quirky tidbit: some empires used executions by exotic animals imported from distant lands, turning punishment into global displays of power. Historians still debate how much these cultures influenced each other's legal practices versus independently developing their systems. You grasp that the Maurya Empire's justice system was both a product of its culture and part of a larger ancient world of punishment and control. Across empires, justice was a reflection of power's harshest realities. You step into the murky waters of historical debate, where scholars question the accuracy of sources describing Mauryan punishments. Imagine sifting through texts written centuries after the empire's fall, mixed with legends, exaggerations, and political agendas. Some argue that ancient chroniclers sensationalized punishments to emphasize the empire's power or to critique its rulers. Others believe that many accounts are factual but limited to specific cases, not representative of everyday justice. A quirky tidbit: Some sources accuse the Mauryan rulers of cruelty based on stories possibly influenced by rival empires' propaganda. Historians still argue whether the Maurya Empire was uniquely brutal or comparable to contemporaneous civilizations. You realize that history's layers can obscure as much as they reveal, challenging you to discern truth from narrative. In studying Mauryan justice, you face the eternal tension between evidence and interpretation. You explore the lasting legacy of Mauryan punishments and how they influenced later Indian legal systems. Imagine echoes of harsh penalties and strict social controls reverberating through centuries, shaping the framework of justice long after the empire's decline. Later dynasties inherited and adapted Mauryan laws, blending them with evolving cultural and religious norms. Some punishments softened over time, while others remained brutal, reflecting enduring attitudes toward crime and control. Picture legal texts and royal edicts referencing Mauryan precedents, highlighting the empire's foundational role in South Asian jurisprudence. A quirky tidbit: some folk tales and proverbs rooted in Mauryan-era justice still circulate in rural India, preserving memory through oral tradition. Historians still debate the extent and nature of this influence. Was it direct inheritance or selective adaptation? You see how the Mauryan legal legacy is a complex tapestry woven through centuries of Indian history. Their approach to punishment left marks both harsh and profound. You arrive at the final reflection on cruelty and control in ancient Mauryan justice, where power was exercised through fear as much as fairness. Imagine a society where punishments were not only about law but about maintaining the emperor's dominance over a vast, diverse empire. You feel the tension between justice as a means of social order and punishment as a tool of political control. The bizarre and brutal methods serve to remind everyone who held the power and who paid the price. Picture the faces of the punished, the crowds that gathered, and the silent fear that hung over the empire. Justice was public, absolute, and often unforgiving, a reflection of a world where survival meant obedience. A quirky tidbit: some philosophers of the time debated the morality of such harsh punishments, hinting at early thoughts on justice and mercy. Historians still argue how much cruelty was necessary versus excessive, and what this says about the nature of power. As you wind down this journey, you see that Mauryan punishments were not merely about crime, they were about control, fear, and the human cost of empire. In the end, you're left with a complex portrait of justice, as terrifying as it is fascinating. As the echoes of the Mauryan Empire's harsh punishments slowly fade into the distance, you find yourself breathing a little easier. The clang of the gavel, the crack of the whip, and the murmurs of the crowd dissolve into a gentle hush, replaced by the soft whisper of history settling like dust in a quiet room. The vivid scenes of ancient justice, once sharp and unsettling, now soften, becoming part of a distant past, an echo that reminds us how far humanity has journeyed. You feel a calm wash over you, a quiet reassurance that these stories, though dark, are lessons wrapped in time. They invite reflection on power, mercy, and the delicate balance that governs societies. Imagine the world gently turning, the sun dipping below an ancient horizon, and the harshness of those old punishments giving way to a softer, more compassionate light. The weight of cruelty lifts, leaving behind only understanding and the slow, steady hope for progress. Let your thoughts drift now, like a leaf carried on a slow river, drifting away from fear and pain. The past holds its secrets, but you are safe here, cradled in the quiet comfort of night. The shadows retreat, the harshness dims, and a gentle whisper carries you forward toward peace, toward rest, toward dreams.